We'll now take the sediment for the Planning and Local Review Body by roll call. I advise that the following members are present: Councillors Ali Callison, Jerry Convery, Mary Donnelly. Do we have Councillor Gladys Ferguson-Miller present?
Present.
Thank you. Councillors Mark Horsham, Leslie MacDonald and Richard Nelson are present. We have apologies from Councillor Norman Ray, and Councillors Ali Salamati and Councillor Graham Scott are also present. Thank you, and I will now pass you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you, Stuart. Declarations of interest, item 1. Any declarations of interest? Item 2 within your papers is a review of case in terms of planning application P211109, pages 5 to 148 in your pack. The applicant is asking the PLRB to review the planning officer's determination to refuse an application for planning permission for the erection of 3 detached dwelling houses and formation of associated vehicle access and parking at Leatham Cottage Ruin, Leatham Highway, Straven. I'm going to pass you over to the planning advisor, James Wright, who will give us the background to this planning.
Thank you, Chair. This local review relates to the refusal of an application for the erection of 3 detached dwelling houses. Detailed planning consent is sought for the erection of 3 detached dwelling houses, including the formation of 3 vehicular accesses and parking at Leatham Cottage, Leatham Highway, which is west of Straven. The site is located in the Greenbelt as defined in the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2. Toward the rear, in the southern area of the application site, are the ruins of a former farmhouse and outbuilding which have been derelict for a number of years. The site is located in a wooded area surrounded by farmland to the south of the minor road, Leatham Highway. The proposal consists of the demolition of the existing ruins of the former farmhouse and the erection of 3 detached 1.5-storey dwelling houses. The proposed dwelling houses will be located in a linear layout on separate plots fronting the road, each with their own vehicular access and parking. As noted in the agenda papers, 3 letters of objection and 1 letter of comment were received following neighbour notification and advertisement in the local paper of the application. The concerns related to the location of the proposals within the Greenbelt, the scale and design of the development replacing the former farmhouse with 3 units. The proposals do not involve restoring the former farmhouse, the loss of trees and wildlife habitat, especially for bats, road safety, setting a precedent, loss of agricultural land, and the request to ensure flora and fauna are protected as part of any development. In terms of consultation, there were 5 consultations requested. The first was to Roads Development Management, who requested a speed survey to establish whether acceptable sightlines for the 3 proposed accesses can be achieved, and suggested that there would be a requirement for passing places to be provided on Leatham Highway into Straven should consent be granted. This request was not sent to the applicant given the officer's determination on other matters. It is noted that road safety was not one of the reasons for refusal. Environmental Services had no objection to the proposals, subject to noise thresholds being met and appropriate refuge storage being provided. West of Scotland Archaeology Service had no objections, subject to a condition requiring a programme of archaeological works being attached to any permission if granted. Straven and Glassford Community Council objected to the application on the basis of it being within the Greenbelt, the fact it does not involve the restoration of the former farmhouse, and that the addition of the houses would be detrimental to the environment and increase the risk of danger and traffic on Leatham Road. Finally, the Council's Arboricultural Officer objected to the proposals on the following grounds. The application site is located in a high-value historical woodland belt, which has not been assessed by the applicant in terms of the British Standard document for trees in relation to construction. It will result in the significant loss of trees and have a detrimental impact on this high-value historical woodland belt. It will result in the retained trees being under threat from felling, significant pruning by future owners. It would not accord with the Scottish Government's control of woodland removal policy. And finally, it would have an adverse impact on the character of the Greenbelt. In assessing this local review, the local review body are respectfully requested to consider the following relevant policies of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2, which are Policy 2, Climate Change, which advises that in order to fulfil the local development plan's overall vision and to meet Scottish Government targets relating to climate change and the reduction of greenhouse gases, any new development proposals should seek to minimise and mitigate against such effects. Then Policy 4, Green Belt and Rural Area. This policy advises that the purpose of the Green Belt is to direct development to the most appropriate locations and support regeneration, protect and enhance the character, landscape setting and identity of the settlement, protect and provide access to open space. Policy 4 also advises that development in the Green Belt will be strictly controlled and any proposals should accord with the appropriate uses set out in Scottish planning policy. Policy 4 goes on to advise that the Green Belt functions primarily for agriculture, forestry, recreation and other uses appropriate to the countryside. Development which does not require to locate in the countryside will be expected to be accommodated within the settlements identified on the proposals map. Isolated and sporadic development will not be supported. Then Policy 5, Development Management and Placemaking, which states that in order to ensure development takes account of the principles of sustainable development, all proposals require to be well designed and integrated with the local area. Proposals should have no unacceptable significant adverse impacts on the local community and the environment. Then Policy 14, Natural and Historic Environment. This policy states that the Council will assess all development proposals in terms of their impact on the natural and historic environment, including biodiversity, geodiversity, landscape and townscape. It also further states that the Council will seek to protect important natural and historic sites and features from adverse impacts resulting from development, including cumulative impacts. Policy DM1, New Development Design, which states that new development will require to promote quality and sustainability in its design and layout and should enhance or make a positive contribution to the character and appearance of the urban or rural environment in which it is located. Policy GBRA1, Rural Design and Development. This states that within the Green Belt and rural area, all proposed developments require to adhere to a set of criteria. There are 7 criteria within this policy, and they are as follows. 1. Development shall be sited in a manner that respects existing built form, landform, and local landscape character and setting. 2. Proposed development shall be well related to locally traditional patterns of scale and shall avoid the introduction of suburban style developments into the rural environment. Proposals specifically for residential development should not be isolated or sporadic. 3. Proposals shall be of a high quality, of either traditional or contemporary innovative design which interprets and adapts traditional principles and features. 4. Proposals shall make use of appropriate materials which respect and reinforce local character and identity. 5. Development shall have no unacceptable adverse impacts on existing residential amenity, particularly in terms of overlooking or overshadowing of existing residential properties. 6. Proposals relating to residential development, including extensions and alterations, shall conform to the requirements of the Council's Residential Design Guide, and in particular shall ensure the provision of appropriate private amenity space to all existing and proposed residential properties. 7. Development proposals shall incorporate suitable boundary treatment and landscaping proposals to minimise the visual impact of the development on the surrounding landscape. Existing trees, woodland and boundary features such as beech and hawthorn hedgerows and stone dykes shall be retained on site. A landscape framework shall be provided, where appropriate, to demonstrate how the development would fit into the landscape and improve the overall appearance of the site. Then Policy GBRA 5, Redevelopment of Previously Developed Land Containing Buildings. This policy states that within the Green Belt and rural area, the Council aim to retain traditional buildings wherever possible. Where it is not possible to retain the building, its facade or other important architectural features shall be kept. In addition, proposals involving the redevelopment of previously developed land containing buildings will be acceptable in principle for modern buildings where it is not desirable to retain an existing building because of its form and layout. For example, non-traditional agricultural or commercial buildings which have fallen into disuse or disrepair over an extended period. This includes sites which are visually or environmentally intrusive or detract from the rural and visual amenity of the area, and where there is no realistic prospect of the site being returned to agricultural land or woodland, or the buildings are being converted to form an alternative use appropriate to the countryside. And finally, we have policy NHE 13 Forestry and Woodland, which states that development proposals should seek to manage, protect and enhance existing ancient semi-natural woodland, other woodlands, hedgerows and individual trees. Proposals likely to impact on woodlands, hedgerows or individual trees should be accompanied by a full tree survey and written justification for any losses. Proposals should accord with the Council's tree strategy. It then goes on to say that in all cases involving the proposed removal of existing woodland, the acceptability of woodland removal and the requirement for compensatory planting will be assessed against the criteria set out in the Scottish Government's policy on control of woodland removal. Removal for development purposes will only be permitted where it would achieve significant and clearly defined public benefits. Where the woodland proposed to be removed is ancient semi-natural woodland, such public benefits should be of national importance. In all cases, developers will generally be expected to deliver compensatory planting. So it is these policies that provide the development plan basis for considering the application. Finally, Chair, the review body should note that the appellant considers a hearing would be of assistance to the review body. Thank you.
Thank you, James. The next point for the PLRB is to consider and decide how to proceed with the review. The applicant's agent, as James has indicated already, that a hearing would be of assistance to the review body. Taking account of what is in our papers, we have to decide if they do in fact contain sufficient information for us to determine the review today, or if we need more written information, a hearing or a site visit. Personally, I think all the information that we have, plus the detailed photographs we have of the site, does provide us with all we need to consider this review. Without either a site visit or hearing or further written submissions, is there any comment from members? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I've read this with great interest and went up over the weekend to have a look at this site. I note what was said regarding the passing places and wondered if in actual fact was the applicant advised that passing places could have been an option to this site.
Just before James, Councillor MacDonald, but first of all, what we're trying to ascertain is if we are happy with what is here. And I think the next bit, we'll come on to that part just in a second. So I'm just going to ask the members then, do the members therefore agree that we can proceed without a site visit, hearing or additional information?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. I'll let James, so we're going to proceed with the review, and Councillor MacDonald, thank you for your question. I'll leave James to answer that.
Thank you, Chair. According from the report on handling, the request for additional information, including a speed survey and the potential for passing places, wasn't forwarded or requested from the applicant. The case officer felt that because road safety wasn't going to be one of the reasons for refusal, they proceeded to determine the application as timeously as they could, citing other reasons that didn't surround the road's development management response. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, observations? Councillor Allison.
Thanks, Chair. Usually start off by suggesting all these policies that James has come out with are more to do with an urban view of what should be happening in the rural areas rather than what the rural areas would fully like themselves. But I think in this case many of them are perhaps appropriate. I think 3 houses in this site would be wrong, although the reason for turning down one and the fact that it was larger than the original farmhouse, I think is false, as I would think any modern house would need to be larger than what was there previously. But generally, I would support the officers here as 3 houses on this site. I think would be an unacceptable development.
Thank you. James, anything further than that?
No.
No other hands raised? Okay, I'll just summarise the points that's already been made. The application is for the erection of 3 detached dwelling houses and formation of associated vehicle access and parking at Leatham Cottage Road, Leatham Highway, Straven. The adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2 identifies the site as being within the designated green belt. If we consider that there is no valid policy justification to support the proposed dwelling house at this location and it would not accord with policies 2, 4, 5, 14, DM1, GBRA 1, GBRA 5 and NHE 13 of the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2, permission can be refused. Or if we consider that there is adequate justification for the location of the proposed dwelling houses, we could grant planning consent subject to conditions. Our options here is the PLRB, uphold or reverse or vary the planning determination. Can I invite any decisions from members? Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Could we vary this? I note what Councillor Allison is saying regarding 3. Personally, I think 3 is too many, but that's just a personal opinion. Is it possible to go back to the applicant and suggest that perhaps 2 would be more in keeping with the general area?
I'll ask Monica to come in.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant could decide at a future date to submit a further application, but in terms of varying the application to date, what is limited, the PLRB is limited to what the application is. So you could perhaps impose a separate condition, but I think to reduce the number of the houses would be considered to be a substantial change to the application.
Councillor MacDonald, have you anything further on that? If nobody's any further, I'll be happy with the paper as the way it stands for us to refuse plan permission, and we are satisfied with the policies quantity that I've already explained out.
Support, refuse.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, therefore the decision of the PLRB is to refuse plan permission. The next stage is that a written decision will be issued by the PLRB, and this should be issued within 28 days. Agenda item 3, review of case of terms and planning application P210405, pages 149 to 280 in your pack. The item before us today is a notice of review from Ferguson Planning on behalf of the estate of the late Nellie French. The applicant is asking the PLRB to review the planning officer's determination to refuse an application for planning permission in principle for the erection of a dwelling house at land to the south of Whiston Mains Cottage, Millrig Road, Whiston. I'll ask the planning advisor, James, to give us a background to this request for a review to the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This local review relates to the refusal of an application for planning permission in principle for the erection of a dwelling house. The application site comprises part of an agricultural field to the southeast of a small building group along Millrig Road, which is identified as Whiston Mains, and is located approximately 550 metres to the southwest of the small settlement of Whiston and comprises 7 residential properties. The application site is separated from Whiston Mains by an existing vehicular access lane which serves Shillowhead Farm and again is taken off Millrig Road. The application is located within the rural area as designated within the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2. As noted, the application is for planning permission in principle and therefore does not include detailed design drawings. As noted in the agenda papers, 2 letters of objection were received following neighbour notification and advertisement of the application in the local paper. The concerns related to The proposal would result in a ribbon development extending beyond the existing building group without appropriate justification, and the plot scale of the proposed development is significantly larger than other properties in the locale. In terms of consultation, there were 2 consultations requested. The first was to Roads Development Management, who had no objections to the application. The second was to SEPA, who have not responded to the consultation request. In assessing this local review, the local review body are respectfully requested to consider the following relevant policies of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2, which are Policy 4, Greenbelt and Rural Area. This policy advised that the purpose of the Greenbelt is to direct development to the most appropriate locations and support regeneration, protect and enhance the character, landscape setting and identity of the settlement, and protect and provide access to open space. Policy 4 also advises that development in the Greenbelt will be strictly controlled and any proposals should accord with the appropriate uses set out in Scottish planning policy. Policy 4 goes on to advise that the Greenbelt functions primarily for agriculture, forestry, recreation and other uses appropriate to the countryside. Development which does not require to locate in the countryside will be expected to be accommodated within the settlements identified on the proposal's map. Isolated and sporadic development will not be supported. Then Policy 5, Development Management and Placemaking. This states that in order to ensure development takes account of the principles of sustainable development, all proposals require to be well designed and integrated within the local area. Proposals should have no unacceptable significant adverse impacts on the local community and the environment. Policy Gbra 1, Rural Design and Development, states that within the Greenbelt and rural area, all proposed developments require to adhere to a set of criteria. There are 7 criteria within this policy, and they are as follows. 1. Development shall be sited in a manner that respects existing built form, landform, and local landscape character and setting. 2. Proposed developments shall be well related to locally traditional patterns of scale and shall avoid the introduction of suburban-style developments into the rural environment. Proposals specifically for residential development should not be isolated or sporadic. 3. Proposals shall be of a high quality, of either traditional or contemporary innovative design which interprets and adapts traditional principles and features. 4. Proposals shall make use of appropriate materials which respect and reinforce local character and identity. 5. Development shall have no unacceptable adverse impacts on existing residential amenity, particularly in terms of overlooking or overshadowing of existing residential properties. 6. Proposals relating to residential development, including extensions and alterations, shall conform to the requirements of the Council's Residential Design Guide, and in particular shall ensure the provision of appropriate private amenity space to all existing and proposed residential properties. 7. Development proposals shall incorporate suitable boundary treatment and landscaping proposals to minimise the visual impact of the development on the surrounding landscape. Existing trees, woodland and boundary features such as beech and hawthorn hedgerows and stone dykes shall be retained on site. A landscape framework shall be provided where appropriate to demonstrate how the development would fit into the landscape and improve the overall appearance of the site. And finally, policy Gbra 9, Consolidation of existing building groups. This policy states that within the Greenbelt and rural area, proposals for new houses within existing building groups will be supported where all of the following criteria can be met. The scale and siting of new development shall reflect and respect the scale, character, cohesiveness, spacing and amenity of the existing group and the individual houses within the group. Any new building shall be located within a reasonable distance of the existing properties within the building group. 2. The proposal shall not result in ribbon or linear development or the coalescence of the housing group with a nearby settlement or another housing group. 3. Development shall not significantly adversely affect the landscape character or setting of the area. In addition, it shall have regard to the landscape backdrop, topographical features and levels. Definable natural boundaries between the existing group and adjacent countryside shall be maintained. Natural boundaries shall generally take precedence over man-made boundaries when defining the extent of a building group. 4. private amenity space shall be provided to any new dwelling at a comparable scale to existing properties within the building group. Any new dwelling or private amenity space afforded to it shall not unacceptably prejudice the size or use of the amenity space afforded to an existing dwelling house. 5. The location, siting and design of the new house shall meet existing rural design policy and guidance as set out in policy Gbra 1 and in supporting planning guidance. Generally, the design, massing, scale, appearance and materials of the proposed house shall be complementary to the character of the existing building group unless it is shown that there is no distinct design character within it. So it is these policies that provide the development plan basis for considering the application. Finally, Chair, the review body should note that the appellant has not requested any other procedure other than a review of the written documents submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, James. The next point for the PLRB is to consider and decide how to proceed with the review. The applicant's agent has indicated that they are content for the review to proceed on the basis of review documents only, with no further procedure. Taking account of what's in our papers, we have to decide if they do in fact contain sufficient information for us to determine the review today, or if we need more written information, a hearing or a site visit to the site. I think that all the information we have, plus the detailed photographs of the site, it does provide us with all we need to consider this review without either a site visit or hearing or further written submissions. Any comments from members? Do the members agree, therefore, that we can proceed without a site visit, hearing and additional information?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Then now proceed to the review. Any points, questions, observations from members? Councillor Allison.
As usual. This is the same but different to the last one. Out in the rural area, one of the things we were told through our training programmes in the last fortnight was that one of the targets of the Scottish Government is to be to increase the rural population. The question is, how are we going to go about that? And I do understand that the council has requested further information as to how they go about that. But the simple thing is, surely it will need to be taken account of just now, and also round about current villages or housing bits. Here you're talking about sporadic development. Well, the village of Whiston covers a huge area. There's perhaps about half a mile between the main bit of the village and the housing and the number of houses we've got on this site. So you're not actually creating a sporadic development here. There is a road which it's the other side of, but that's man-made boundary. The natural boundary is a distance away, and anyway there is a natural boundary between the two parts of the village. I think if we're genuinely looking at trying to increase the rural population, this is a type of site that we'll need to look at. And if it is something that we're going to be looking at in the future, what we normally do is try and take into account these types of policies before they're actually enacted. And I think this would then be suitable under these categories, whilst accepting it does impinge on some of the policies, but not all, and it would help with rural population.
Thank you, Alec. James, would you like to come in just on any question, the rural policy?
I must admit, I don't think there was any technical clarification, but just to, I think Councillor Allison is alluding to the draft National Planning Framework 4, which does have repopulating rural communities as one of the themes. It's, as I say, is currently a draft, and we don't know if it's nationwide in terms of the whole of Scotland or if it would refer more specifically to the Highlands and Islands. But it is something that is in the draft NPF 4. And as I say, we are waiting for a clarification on exactly how it may affect our development plan. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Alec, you any other further points you would like to make?
Just I think I'm going to actually formally move that we grant this. It's not green belt either. The nearest significant population, how far is it from Biggar? Could be 5-6 miles away. It's remote or rural area next to a small village. It's not green belt. I think it's the ideal area for increasing or helping building in the rural area.
Thank you, Alec. You get a seconder for your amendment? Is that the motion? Anybody like to second Councillor Allison?
No hands raised, Chair.
No hands raised. Any other further points? Sorry, Alec, no seconder for you.
Okay, cheers.
Okay, if that's, can I just summarise then? The application is for plan permission in principle for the erection of a dwelling house at land at the south of Whiston Mains Cottage, Mulrig Road, Whiston. The adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2 identifies the site as being within the designated rural area. If we consider that there is no valid policy justification to support the proposed dwelling house at this location, and it would not accord with policies 4, 5, Gbra 1 and Gbra 9 of the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2, permission can be refused. Or if we consider there is adequate justification for the location of the proposed dwelling houses, we could grant planning consent subject to conditions. Any comments from members? We're happy to uphold the officer's decision to refuse this application. Right. Therefore, it's a decision of the BLRB to refuse planning permission. We are satisfied that the proposed development would be contrary to 4, 5, Gbra 1 and Gbra 9 of the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2. The next stage is that a written decision will be issued by the PLRB, and this should be issued within 28 days. Item 4, I don't have any items of urgent business. Can I ask the clerk to stop the recording of the meeting, please?